I am the land that listens. I am the land that broods, steeped in eternal beauty, crystalline waters and woods. The words of Robert Service are as compelling today as when the poet first trod the untamed frontier of the Yukon at the turn of the century. A country of sophisticated cities and magnificent wilderness, Canada spans the vast northern expanses of the North American continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the farthest reaches of the Arctic to its southern border with the United States. The mix of cultures that constitutes Canada ranges from the First Peoples to the descendants of the French voyageurs to the British, Chinese, and Ukrainians. Canada is not a melting pot, but rather a rich cultural stew. Each culture has retained its own character and flavor, while contributing its essence to what it means to be Canadian. Canada, with a population of only 27 million people, is home to fewer people than live in the state of California. Yet in this vast land, 80% of all Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border. In contrast, the northern and Arctic regions are virtually unpopulated. They are home to the polar bear, the caribou, and to one of the world's best-known symbols of wildlife preservation, the baby harp seal. The second largest country in the world, Canada encompasses nearly 4 million square miles of territory. The region known as Atlantic Canada includes the provinces of New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and a small and very beautiful island called Prince Edward Island. First successfully colonized by the descendants of those who walked over the ancient land bridge across the Bering Strait from Asia, the nomads simply refer to themselves as the people. They include the Inuit and members of such powerful nations as the Iroquois, Athapascan, and Haida families. Within these families, the different tribes developed their own territories, culture, language, and religion. On the eastern side of the continent, Leif Erikson explored the coastline of Baffin Island, Labrador, and Newfoundland. Sailing their high-prowed vessels across the seas of the North Atlantic, the Vikings were the first Europeans to reach North America. In Newfoundland, the Norsemen landed and built large sod and wood houses. There they forged iron, hunted, and trapped. According to the Norse sagas, it was the year 1000. At L'Anse aux Meadows, ancient remains radiocarbon dated between the year 860 and the year 1060 confirmed the sagas as history, not myth. The ancient ashes and artifacts are indisputable evidence that L'Anse aux Meadows was a Viking settlement. Nearly 5 centuries after the Vikings, the Anglo-Italian explorer John Cabot entered into his captain's log the sighting of the coast of North America on the 24th of June, 1497. The Cabot Tower at Signal Hill honors what historians describe as the intellectual discovery of America. For though Cabot claimed the new continent for England, he neither colonized it nor carried back riches. Signal Hill, long a witness to Newfoundland's history, rises above the harbor of St. John's, the provincial capital. The memory of battles fought between the British and the French is kept alive by the Signal Hill tattoo.
Royal Newfoundland Company, halt! Company, fire!
A Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi's magical proof of things invisible was tapped out in Morse code when the world's first radio transmission was received on Signal Hill from Cornwall, England in 1901. The system of flags that once flew to warn sailors of the hazards of the sea are now replaced by marine radio frequencies, carefully monitored by all the ships at sea. The relationship between Europe and North America has always been strong, and communication of the first importance. It made sense that the first transatlantic telegraph cable linking the two continents should come ashore in Newfoundland, the closest point between Canada and England. In 1866, the last section of the cable was hauled ashore at Heart's Content. The first permanent European settlement of the land, now known as Canada, was established in 1605 at Port Royal, in the land the French called Acadia.
Telling you the story of the Acadian people, we have to start off in their homeland, which was France. The Acadians were colonizers. They wanted to come and start a new life. They came and they based their economy on agriculture. Now, they were happy here under French rule, but eventually in 1713, with the Treaty of Utrecht, this became a British colony. And the Acadians were told that if they wanted to stay, they had to become British citizens, which meant defending England, signing an oath of allegiance. They refused, the British didn't push for a while, but eventually, after the 7 Years' War, the British couldn't trust the Acadians anymore. So they told them that they had to sign or leave. Acadians refused, and they were deported to the New England colonies. So they eventually left, migrated throughout the world, went to many places such as Martinique, Santo Domingo, France. Some came back here, and we have the cultures vibrant today. But the majority, as you may probably know, went to Louisiana, and you know them as the Cajuns.
The Acadian dispersal is immortalized in Longfellow's poem Evangeline. The poet's poignant description speaks across the centuries to all people forced to leave their loved ones by events beyond their control. Wives were torn from their husbands, and mothers, too late, saw their children left on land, extending their arms with wildest entreaties. So onto separate ships Basil and Gabriel were carried, while in despair on the shore, Evangeline stood with her father. Colonel Edward Cornwallis founded the city of Halifax in 1749, establishing British control in Nova Scotia. Throughout the 18th century, both England and France had built forts along the coast to enforce their claims to the rich North Atlantic fishing grounds. Busy stone warehouses and shingled counting houses along the waterfront have been restored to their centuries-old charm. Halifax is home port to the Bluenose II, a replica of the famous 19th century fishing schooner. The tall ship is an internationally recognized goodwill ambassador for the Atlantic provinces. Looking across the bright waters, three churches on shore command a dramatic view of the charming village of Mahone Bay. There is ample time here to enjoy the view and spend a few hours with a hook and line. Another beautiful fishing village, Peggy's Cove, is widely famed for its lighthouse, which may well be one of the most frequently photographed in the world. It boasts its own post office and its own postmark. Peggy's Cove is also well known for its lobster. Always absolutely fresh, always absolutely delicious.
We get our lobsters fresh from the bay, and people can come over and pick lobsters out themselves, or we will aid them in picking them out.
Eating lobster is a skill. but having to practice is no hardship at all. Fly fishing is also a skill, a bit more difficult to master than cracking lobster perhaps, but offering similar rewards. Widely considered the ultimate prize in fly fishing, Atlantic salmon are called the kingly salmon. For centuries, they were the prerogative of royalty and the aristocracy. The Miramichi River in New Brunswick supplies some of the finest Atlantic salmon fishing in the world. Nicolas Denis, a 17th century traveler, observed of the Miramichi. So large a quantity of salmon enters this river that at night one is unable to sleep. So great is the noise they make in falling upon the water after having thrown or darted themselves into the air while passing over the river flats. Like most North American rivers, the Miramichi fell on hard times. Pollution and overfishing devastated the spawning salmon. New Brunswick moved so effectively to protect the fish that the Miramichi River is now the most successful Atlantic salmon fishery on the continent. Prince Edward Island floats on the waves of a blue gulf, a green seclusion and haunt of ancient peace. So wrote Lucy Maud Montgomery, author of Anne of Green Gables. Some characters leap right out of the pages of the books they inhabit and straight into the hearts of readers around the world. Thousands have traveled here to see the Cavendish farmhouse, where Montgomery's appealing carrot-topped young heroine came to life. Helicopters from Prince Edward Island and the Magdalen Islands airlift wildlife adventurers to the ice floes to see the harp seal nursery. It is one of the premier wildlife experiences in the world. Harp seals pup at the same time in the same place every year. In March, the ice is littered with the black-eyed, sweet-faced creatures so familiar from wildlife conservation posters. It is possible to approach the pups and even pet them. Harp seals breed elsewhere, but nowhere except on the ice off the Magdalen Islands can they be seen so intimately. Eastern Canada includes Quebec, Canada's largest province stretching over 1,200 miles, and Ontario, the most heavily populated as well as the wealthiest and most industrialized. Commissioned by François Ier of France to find gold in the New World and a northwest passage to Asia, Jacques Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River in 1535. Landing at an Iroquois village near the site of what is today Quebec City, he asked the natives what they called this land. They told him Kanata, the Iroquois word for settlement. For the next 100 years, the staple fur traded was beaver, as well as fancy furs such as lynx, Arctic fox, and mink. From Quebec City, the furs were shipped all over Europe. In England, an Act of Parliament passed by the House of Commons in 1638 prohibited the use of any material but beaver for men's hats. In 1647, 2 ships alone carried 10 tons of beaver skins from Canada to England. The Hudson's Bay Company was chartered in London in 1670 to pursue the fur trade. More than 320 years after its incorporation, the Hudson's Bay Company remains Canada's largest retailer. First observed by Europeans in 1542, Montmorency Falls is a shimmering crystalline wonder. 6 miles outside of Quebec City, the roaring falls plunge 274 feet, more than 1.5 times the height of Niagara Falls. In the winter, the spray forms a sugar loaf that offers an irresistible temptation to slide 70 feet to the bottom. Past and present meet on every corner of old Quebec City. The British commander James Wolfe laid siege to the city after marching the 6 miles from Montmorency to Quebec during the 7 Years' War between England and France. In 1759, French General Montcalm sent soldiers to battle the British on the Plains of Abraham. Wolfe won the Battle of Quebec, and that fateful victory cost France her claims to Canada. A ride or stroll through the old quarter of Quebec City is a journey through the 17th century. Set like a 17th century jewel overlooking the proud and powerful St. Lawrence, Old Quebec City is divided into 2 parts, Upper Town and Lower Town. A landmark of Lower Town is Notre-Dame des Victoires, an exquisite stone church designed by French architect Claude Baillif. It was constructed in 1688 on the site of Quebec's first trading post. The altar is elaborately sculptured in the form of a castle. Suspended in the nave is a scale model of the ship which brought the Carignan Regiment to New France in the 1660s to fight the Iroquois. The church takes its name from 2 French victories over the British, but its name alone could not protect it. When Wolfe besieged and bombarded Quebec, the church burned to the ground. Notre-Dame des Victoires was restored in 1766 and again in 1969. Looming high on the rocky cliffs of Cap Diamant is one of the leading landmarks of Quebec, the baronial Château Frontenac. Built by the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1892, the Château Frontenac initiated a tradition of chateau-style hotels that became a uniquely Canadian architectural form. Quebec is a rich potpourri of old and new, of past and present. Though England won Quebec from France 200 years ago, 80% of all Québécois are direct descendants of the French voyageurs and the colonists of New France. And while the nation as a whole has 2 official languages, French and English, French alone is the official language of the province of Quebec. Even the culture and art are unique, different in both approach and technique from the rest of Canada. Steeped in the French language and French Canadian culture from the day they are born, Quebec's artists often look as much to France for inspiration as to the rest of North America. New dance choreographer Jean-Pierre Perrault.
Quebec culture in general is very strong because of the socio-political and geographical situation that we're in. You know, it's very odd to be a Quebecer. You know, you're 6 million people in English North America. So automatically, and we're of a Catholic background, we still have very close ties to Europe. So it created a very different people, and automatically it creates a different art. And I think that the dance that is created here, because it never followed any of the major masters of modern dance or the techniques, we had to form our own. And because of that, it gave us a lot of freedom.
Undeniably possessing a strong sense of history and an insouciant Gallic charm, Quebec City also comprehends all the nuances of joie de vivre, especially when it includes a rollicking good time. Sometimes described as the frostbite version of Mardi Gras, the Quebec Winter Carnival offers Québécois of all ages a chance to participate in carving elaborate ice sculptures, showing off their skating skills, or simply taking in the spectacle. It attracts professional ice skaters as well, including Olympic medal winners from around the world.
Nous sommes à l'abri des curieux.
France may have decamped politically in 1763, but she left behind her language, her religion, her culture, and her music. Here in the rich tradition of such French singers as Edith Piaf and Charles Aznavour, one can find a chanson singer to while away a night of romance, singing of amour et tristesse, of love and sadness.
Surtout n'y touchez pas. Il est mon homme à moi.
Jacques Cartier failed to find gold in Canada, but he was the first European to chart the shores and shoals of the St. Lawrence River. He was also the first Frenchman to step ashore on the island of Montreal, where the St. Lawrence and Ottawa rivers flow together, forming one magnificent and mighty river. In 1642, 36 missionaries, hired by the Society of Notre Dame in Paris to convert the natives to Catholicism, founded the city that would become Montreal. The fascinating history of the fearless voyageurs, the merchant princes, and the opening of the immense Canadian frontier lives today in the narrow streets of old Montreal. Vieux Montréal takes pride in its architectural heritage. The greatest concentration of 17th, 18th, and 19th century buildings in all of North America. It is famous as well for its concentration of exquisite restaurants featuring French-Canadian recipes.
In this restaurant, we specialize in French-Canadian food. Feuilleté de caribou in pastry shell, caribou meat with spices, onions, fruit, ketchup, homemade. Sugar pie has homemade maple sugar and cream.
It is probably the only cuisine in the world underwritten by a king. In 1663, the ratio of men to women in New France was 6-1. To rectify this imbalance, Louis XIV bestowed 850 young French women with a modest dowry and shipped them to New France to find husbands. With these young women came their knowledge of traditional French cooking. They applied their culinary wisdom to native foods and created such dishes as creton, a pork pâté, and cipaille, a layered meat pie prepared with wild game and smothered in a Bordelaise sauce. Mark Twain once described Montreal as a city where you couldn't throw a brick without hitting a church window. He was very nearly right. Montreal has more than 400 churches. One of the most charming is Notre Dame de Bon Secours, the Sailors' Church. The most imposing of Montreal's churches, the neo-Gothic Notre Dame Basilica, was constructed in 1829. The dazzling altar is a tour de force of wood carving. Designed by Canadian architect Victor Bourgeot, the altar displays the exquisite mastery and craftsmanship of the French sculptor Henri Bourriche.
This organ has 4 keyboards and pedal, 84 stops, 6,800 pipes. It is the largest organ in Canada, and it is a French symphonic inspiration from the 19th century.
Built by the famed organ manufacturer Casavant Frères, this extraordinary instrument pours forth sound that sings and swells and soars, filling this sanctified space with music fit for the angels. The second largest French-speaking city in the world, modern Montreal comes in two layers: the contemporary skyscraper skyline on the surface and the subterranean city. Built to escape the harshness of winter, the underground city is completely accessible by the metro subway system. It provides everything anyone could possibly want: boutiques, bookstores, and restaurants, all without ever having to deal with frozen noses or icy sidewalks. Where winter ice is a fact of life, it only makes sense to make a national sport out of it. Canadian children learn to skate almost as soon as they can walk. And the very next thing they learn is how to play ice hockey. The first formal hockey game was played in Montreal in 1875, with a set of rules drawn up by J.G.A. Creighton, a student from McGill University. Even pee-wee hockey games draw big crowds, and professional sports scouts looking for the next big major league talent. Not every boy in Canada can grow up to be Wayne Gretzky, but all of them can dream about it. Founded as a non-denominational college in 1821, McGill University serves nearly 20,000 students. Along with the Université de Montréal and the Université de Quebec at Montreal, McGill invigorates the cosmopolitan intellectual atmosphere of the city. McGill President David L. Johnson.
The cultural traditions of Canada draw from the many sources from which our people have come. And as a consequence, one finds a fairly wide variety in the music and the literature that we see. If one looks at painting and sculpture, perhaps there is a heavier emphasis on the outdoors, the landscape, the natural. But I think that's consistent with a uniqueness to Canada as well, that we are a people that live closely with our outdoors, and perhaps because we have such large space and we border on three great oceans in the world, that is part of our psyche.
The scenery, wildlife, and the open-air sports all entice Quebecois out of doors, whatever the weather. In the winter, they cross-country ski, ice skate, compete fiercely at ice hockey, snuggle up on sleigh rides, and skidoo Quebec's hundreds of miles of snowmobile trails. Nestled into the Laurentian Highlands, Mont Sainte-Anne is internationally known for its excellent slopes. World Cup races have been held there for more than 20 years. It provides ski jumps and 55 miles of illuminated trails for nighttime skiing. Sugar maple forests guarantee delicious fun at Pierre Fouché's authentic turn-of-the-century Sugar Shack. Montrealers flock to the mountains to taste the best maple syrup in the country, sample old-fashioned snow candy, and partake in the pleasures of genuine French-Canadian cooking.
Around this beautiful maple forest, I created an attraction relating to the early 1900s. I built up, like the stories from my father in the early lumberjack days, log cabins, and where I cook the bread and most of the food that we serve in a huge wood oven made out of rocks. And then inside the dining room, we took apart 10 old barns and we built up the atmosphere of the early 1900s, like at my grandfather's house, with table, with benches, oil lamps, hand-woven curtain, wood stove, and fireplaces. And around all this, people can share the food and sing and dance and appreciate the old-fashioned ways of living.
A Iroquois word meaning shining waters. Ontario is the perfect name for a province that sparkles with more than 250,000 lakes and rivers. high above the rapids and falls of the Ottawa River, rises the federal capital of Ottawa. The river forms a natural boundary between Ontario and Quebec. In 1857, Queen Victoria herself commissioned the soaring Gothic spires that grace Parliament Hill. The Parliament buildings house the Senate Chamber, the House of Commons, the Speaker's Chamber, and the Parliamentary Library. The country of Canada is a constitutional republic consisting of 10 provinces and 2 territories. Before Ottawa was chosen to be the nation's capital, the Rideau Canal was dug to provide a way to provision the military in case the Americans cut off supplies coming down the river. Like the Halifax Citadel, the Rideau Canal was constructed to defend against an American attack that never occurred. Used exclusively for pleasure craft in the summer, the canal is the world's longest skating rink in the winter. Thousands of tulips flower each spring, brilliant streamers of rainbow colors that commemorate Canada's aid to the Netherlands during the Second World War. As for those American attacks that never came, the border between Canada and the United States is today the world's longest undefended border. Designed by the world-renowned Israeli-Canadian architect Moshe Safdie, the National Gallery is elegant, airy, and flooded with natural light. The gallery celebrates Canadian painting and sculpture. Its collections showcase both historical and contemporary Canadian art. A sacred place of powerful spiritual significance to the native peoples, Niagara Falls bear the name the Adirondack originally gave them. Niagara, thunder of water. That thunder is the sound of 41 million gallons per minute plunging straight down 178 feet. Louis Hennepin, the first European explorer to describe the spectacle, called Niagara a vast and prodigious cadence of water. Bright lights, big city. Toronto is Canada's Big Apple, the largest city in Canada, home to more than 3 million. It is the country's financial center, the place to make it big. Toronto supports the arts, theater, ballet, and exclusive shopping boutiques that specialize in panache, charm, and elegance. Toronto also enjoys a rich architectural heritage. When the St. James Cathedral was completed in 1874, the steeple pierced so much farther into the air than anything else in town that sailors used it as a landmark. Today, the CN Tower has overtaken the steeple of St. James by far. It is not only the tallest building in Toronto, but the tallest freestanding structure in the world. At 1,821 feet tall, it stretches more than 1/3 of a mile into Canada's sky. Toronto's architecture is a melange of old and new, influenced by ethnic diversity, for Toronto is a city of neighborhoods. Chinatown, as well as the Greek, Italian, and Polish district, each maintains its own culture. Yorkville is a neighborhood of Victorian houses converted to art galleries, designer boutiques, and fashionable restaurants. Here, Toronto's new money and old money meet in cafes to linger over cappuccino and conversation, playing at high society's favorite pastime of seeing and being seen. Everyone comes together at the Nathan Phillips Square ice skating rink. Whether skating hand in hand or dancing on ice, it's Toronto's most popular winter meeting place. The many people who have made their home here all contribute to the rich multicultural communities that take Toronto beyond the merely metropolitan and make it truly cosmopolitan. Girls who dream of becoming prima ballerinas with the National Ballet of Canada must start their lessons very young. By the time the girls audition at the National Ballet School, they have studied ballet for most of their lives. The romantic visions of tutus, starring roles, and the thrill of applause give way to severe chignons, practice leotards, and the discipline of thousands of hours of practice at the bar.
I like ballet because it's exercise and it's really fun and you can express yourself through dance, and hopefully I can fulfill my dream of becoming a classical ballet dancer.
Now let's do in the same, just if you could, just when you come and spread out, and we'll change this time with the other girls and we'll go straight into it, all right? Like we did yesterday. I think generally, in a school like the National Ballet, it's because they've chosen at a very young age that they would like to do ballet as a career. So they come to a school of this nature, which is a professional school, which gives them the training to go into a ballet as a career, or any form of dance that they would choose after that.
Aspiring ballerinas practice at the National Ballet School under the critical eye of their ballet instructor. And when the dream comes true and they grow up to dance with the National Ballet, they rehearse under the still more critical eye of the company's ballet master. Western Canada has an astonishing range of scenery. From Manitoba's subarctic tundra and Saskatchewan's rich farmlands to Alberta's majestic mountain peaks and British Columbia's coastal forests. No matter how modern and convenient Canada's cities are, at their back is always the haunting wildness of the far north, the kingdom of the ice bear, the land of Nanook of the North. Polar bears are creatures of the far north and the Arctic. They are found nowhere else on Earth. At Churchill, Manitoba, polar bears gather every November, for it is near Churchill that Hudson's Bay first freezes into solid ice. Churchill is equipped with a polar bear siren that sounds whenever a bear is spotted ambling down a street or pawing through the town garbage. If the animal persists in wandering around town, it is hauled off to Churchill's polar bear jail, where it is accommodated at the town's expense until the ice freezes. Polar bears hunt seals, but before they can go out onto the ice to stalk their prey, the ice must be solid enough to support their tremendous weight. Adult males can weigh 1,500 pounds, 3/4 of a ton of pure predator. While they wait on the shore for the ice to form, the young bears spar. They learn important lessons in self-defense from wrestling and mock biting. When the time comes to pick a mate, protect a kill, or defend a cub, polar bears fight, sometimes to the death. Polar bears are the subject, spirit, and essence of countless Inuit myths. By far the largest Arctic animal, polar bears are also intelligent, inquisitive, and highly individual. The polar bear is not merely a symbol of this region, but the very embodiment of life, the Arctic incarnate. The great white bears are not the only creatures that have adapted to Arctic conditions. Arctic foxes trail polar bears out onto the winter ice and scavenge their seal kills. On land, the foxes listen acutely for the sounds of mice scurrying under the snow, stalking and pouncing on them like cats. Most Arctic animals, the polar bear excepted, change coats from white to brown to match the snow in winter and the tundra in summer. The fox, the ptarmigan, and the snowy owl all wear camouflage. Wild swans tattoo patterns across the sky. Wild geese return for the brief Arctic summer to nest. Many birds breed in the Arctic: eared grebes, seagulls, and Arctic loons. Under the midnight sun, Arctic cotton bursts into bloom, and the Arctic sky soars blue and limitless over the burgeoning life of summer. The golden fields of summer stretch endlessly across the prairies of Saskatchewan. The breadbasket of Canada, Saskatchewan is prime wheat country, the size of Texas, and one of the great wheat-growing regions of the world. But the financial demands of the family farm are changing, and it has become difficult for the new generation of farmers to prosper.
Farming would be the ultimate way to spend your life. But there are just strings attached like any other business. Other people have other jobs, but if you can viably not raise a family, it doesn't matter how much you like it or enjoy it.
One group of committed farmers is making the cooperative farm succeed for them. Similar in many ways to the Mennonites and the Amish, the Hutterites originated in Moravia in the 16th century. After settling in various countries of Eastern Europe and the United States, each time fleeing persecution, the Hutterites immigrated to Canada in the early 20th century. The families have clung tenaciously to their religious beliefs, ancestral German dialect, and the customs of their forefathers. A brave and stalwart spirit has served them well. Hutterite farms are among the most productive in the land. In the little crimson manual, it's written plain and clear that who would wear the scarlet coat shall say goodbye to fear, shall be a guardian of the right, a sleuth hound of the trail. In the little crimson manual, there is no such word as fail. Only the Canadian Mounties could possibly inspire such poetry, and so they did in these lines from Robert Service's Clancy of the Mounted Police. But then, no police force in the world possesses as romantic a history as the legendary Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The RCMP began as the Northwest Mounted Police. Their mission? To tame the West. To their eternal credit, they did it wisely and well. During the first years of their existence, the Mounties used negotiation, not force of arms, to enforce the law on the vast frontier. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police Training Centre at Regina, Saskatchewan instills recruits with the values that befit a symbol of national pride. The RCMP still drills Mounties in the century-old exhibitions of horsemanship known as the musical ride.
I think the biggest satisfaction of being part of the musical ride has to do with the look on people's faces when you're performing, especially when we come to near the end of the ride and the charge is about to begin. As we head at a full gallop towards the crowd, some of the people start to scatter and then we come to a dead stop and they all, whoa!
On the east side of the Continental Divide, high in the Canadian Rockies, lies one of Alberta's natural jewels, Banff National Park. Canada's first national park, Banff is also the most popular. It adjoins Jasper, Kootenay, and Yoho National Parks, the four together forming the largest mountain parkland in the world. 3 different ecosystems within the parks range from Arctic to forest to prairie, and all support a rich population of animals. Amid the towering crags of the Canadian Rockies, the Banff Springs Hotel stands in all its glorious splendor. Its turrets and towers add a note of grand romance to the magnificence of the mountains. Chateau Lake Louise in Banff National Park is another example of the luxurious Canadian chateau style. In the summer, the waters of Lake Louise shimmer emerald green. Mountain trails wind upward to alpine meadows where deer graze silently on wildflowers. In the winter, well-groomed slopes provide superior skiing. Lake Louise has 44 designated runs to offer, with 44,000 skiable acres of terrain. The quintessential western city, Calgary, sits at the point where the long prairies meet the tall mountains. Calgary can legitimately claim to having been present at the birth of the Northwest Mounted Police. In large part, the force was founded to put the moonshiners out of business at rowdy Fort Whoop-Up, not far from Calgary. Cattle ranching and the Alberta oil fields brought prosperity to the growing city. Skyscrapers and architecturally innovative buildings such as the Saddle Dome define Calgary's distinctive skyline. The Calgary Stampede brings people from all over the world to revisit the Old West at this giant outdoor rodeo.
This'll work. Bareback ride. Uh-oh. No. One hand, that's all you get. Yeah. All set up, Lindsay. You're all right. I thought he was going to get some time there, buddy.
Not far from Calgary, at Dinosaur Provincial Park in the Drumheller Badlands, thousands of dinosaur fossils have been excavated. More than 50 complete dinosaur skeletons found in the Badlands have been reconstructed at the Terrell Museum of Paleontology, the largest collection of complete skeletons in the world. The French explorer Cartier called Canada the land God gave to Cain. He was referring to Genesis 4, in which Cain, having killed his brother Abel, is condemned to till land that is barren. But Cartier never saw British Columbia. The people who live there call it God's country. In 1871, the Canadian Confederation promised rail service to British Columbia within 10 years if British Columbia would join the Confederation. Asserts one historian, bonds of steel as well as of sentiment were needed to hold the new Confederation together. Without railways, there would be and could be no Canada. British Columbia accepted, and with that decision, expanded the borders of Canada from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The first transcontinental train left Montreal on the 28th of June, 1886, and arrived in British Columbia 6 days later. If we can't export the scenery, we'll import the tourists, declared William Van Horn, president of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Snaking through half a dozen mountain ranges between Banff and Vancouver, the Rocky Mountaineer winds its way through some of the most scenic mountain passes in the Rockies. The Rocky Mountaineer is quite simply one of the world's spectacular train rides. West of the Rockies lies one of the most exciting cities in Canada, Vancouver. Crowds come out at night to sample the fun and temptation of its nightlife. But the lights of the night give way to sunrise as the morning warmth blankets the mountains surrounding the city. Vancouver probably has the mildest climate in all of Canada, thanks to the influence of the Japanese Current, a submarine river of warm water that flows just offshore. That may help explain why Vancouver is the largest city in British Columbia and the third largest in Canada. On the other hand, it may be the setting. Poised at the edge of the Pacific with forested mountains in the background, the city takes full advantage of all its possibilities.
I've been living here for 2.5 years, and the parts I like the best about it are the weather and the people and the business that's going on here. Climate's fantastic. You can sail one part of the morning and then ski for the afternoon, and then be out partying, having a good time in the night. So it's a lot of fun.
And of course, Grouse Mountain and its skiing are only 15 minutes from downtown. With 1,000 acres of sun-filled gardens and cool, dark forests, Stanley Park is the largest park in Vancouver. Accessibility for everyone makes a beautiful day all the more special. Even a stroll along the seawall can provide a good chance of seeing seals, migratory ducks, or a great blue heron.
You say dolphin?
Dolphin.
Oh, that's good. And here comes the whale again.
Tucked into a corner of Stanley Park is the Vancouver Aquarium. More than 9,000 aquatic animals call the aquarium home, including beluga and killer whales. Under the Granville Bridge is the Granville Market, a huge public market overflowing with the bounty that comes from the combination of rich soil and a beneficent climate. all the best of the West Coast is sold in its season. The challenge is choosing. On Vancouver's western edge, along the Pacific, lies the University of British Columbia Museum of Anthropology. It houses one of the finest collections of Northwest Coast native art to be found anywhere. On the grounds of the museum are reconstructions of native Northwest Coast longhouses. The coastal tribes were prosperous, living comfortably in huge post and beam cedar homes. Tall totem poles stood outside, telling the family's history. Haisla artist Lyle Wilson.
This process of doing sculpture today is quite different from the past in a sense that today the buildings are so finely designed that people who carve are actually requested to do a scale model which is exact. Whereas in the old days when they do a house post or a totem pole, they do it entirely from memory or their experience. So there's no scale models, there's no drawings, as opposed to today where everything is really, really finely tuned. This piece has been commissioned by the First Nations House of Learning, which is a center for Aboriginal people at the University of British Columbia. And it's made out of red cedar, and it'll be two figures that are half human and half animal. And one side will represent the eagle, and the other side will represent the beaver clan, which is on this side. And the reason why I picked them was because the beaver is my mother's crest, and the eagle is my father's crest. So I wanted to present both of those on this post, because it does represent myself and my family from Kitimat.
That certain pride in its ethnicity has given Vancouver a multicultural atmosphere. The Chinese arrived in this area in 1858. The attraction was the Fraser River Gold Rush, and all who came hoped to strike it rich. Today, Vancouver is enriched and enlivened by its substantial Chinese population. Early in the morning, people gather to practice Tai Chi. The teachings and techniques have been handed down from generation to generation. A short ferry ride away from the city of Vancouver is Vancouver Island. The island is named for George Vancouver, the English navigator who charted much of the continent's northwest coast. Vancouver Island is a microcosm of all of Canada. It has an exquisitely civilized city, Victoria. And in the interior, splendid wilderness. Victoria has been accused of out-Britishing the British. It has imposing parliament buildings, a glorious English-style garden miraculously fashioned out of an abandoned quarry called Bouchard Gardens, and the matchless turn-of-the-century Empress Hotel. Tea at the Empress is not just a meal, it's an event. A challenging sea kayak trip north to the Queen Charlotte Islands is like taking a journey back in time. The Haida village at Tanu has the largest collection of totem poles in Canada in their original location. The Haida who settled this wild coast left behind these towering sentinels to haunt the peace of this silent wilderness. It seems impossible to go from the ultra-civilized tradition of high tea to the wilderness. But that is how Canada lives, an amazing and marvelous melange of modern sophistication and untouched, untamed frontier. The Yukon Territory was opened up by the gold seekers of the Klondike Gold Rush in the 19th century. Adjoining the Yukon, the Northwest Territories constitute 1/3 of the landmass of Canada, by far the largest political subdivision in the country. It extends to within 500 miles of the North Pole and includes the islands of the Arctic archipelago, among them Ellesmere and Baffin Islands. Located on the north arm of Great Slave Lake, amid the jagged rocks of the Precambrian Shield, Yellowknife is the capital and the only city in the Northwest Territories. Gold was discovered in 1896 by miners on their way to the Klondike, but the gold rush didn't get underway in the Northwest Territories until 1934. Today, subsistence fishing keeps the native people of the Northwest Territories living in close touch with nature and their tribal traditions. This harsh land is unforgiving. Only knowledge of the ancient ways can ensure survival. Carrying a snow knife, recognizing the right kind of snow to use, and knowing how to build an igloo are essential skills in the far north. Blizzards blow up out of nowhere, and whiteouts can last for days. To survive, one must read the horizon constantly and anticipate. Surrounded by the icy Arctic waters, Baffin Island is the largest island in Canada and 5th largest in the world. The Arctic tundra, often called the Barren Ground and considered a wasteland, is in fact rich in wildlife during the brief Arctic summer. Migratory birds, especially seabirds, come to breed. Courting, nesting, and raising the chicks occupy the long days of summer when the sun never sets. In the winter, beluga whales and walrus come to feed in the abundant waters off the coast. Magnificent with glaciers, waterfalls, and splendid isolation, Inuit National Park on Baffin Island is the first and only national park in Canada north of the Arctic Circle. Neither food nor shelter is available. Everything must be packed in.
During the day in the park here, the climate and the location is, especially with the weather, with lots of mountains like these, weather may change 3 to 4 times a day. And the people that come here are usually have to carry everything on their back, and they hike up and down into Pang Pass, and the area is very, very rugged. You have to walk through lots of moraines and crossing the rivers.
Named for the Yukon River that flows in a sinuous curve westward through Alaska to the Bering Sea, the Yukon Territory may be Canada's most romantic frontier. The name is derived from the native word Yukon-a, meaning Great River. The river's valley was the great highway that led the first peoples from Asia into the unknown interior of the North American continent. Member of the Wolf Clan, Johnny Smith.
You know, my dad trained me to travel around the bush and how to live in the bush and what to do in the bush. And everybody does that. All the old people that always talk to their kids how to make their living in the bush. You have to learn all them things. You have to learn with the bow and arrow, things like that. And snares, how you can catch game, and they show you how to hunt, and they show you what to do. And if you don't learn that, you're not very good in the bush. Just like you're going to high school like to learn.
Knowledge of the bush was also essential to the early miners when gold was discovered at Bonanza Creek in 1896 by George Washington Carmack, Tagish Charlie, and Skookum Jim. The Klondike Gold Rush exploded on the continental consciousness in huge front-page headlines. Ton of gold. More than 100,000 eager gold miners with a bad case of Klondike fever swarmed into the Yukon. Chichakos, newcomers, seasoned into sourdoughs, old-timers, as they slogged hundreds of miles across rugged, trackless terrain to stake their claim to a lifetime of riches. In the first 7 years, $100 million in gold was taken out of creek gravel in the Yukon. Originally a provisioning point for prospectors trudging north to the gold fields, Dawson City was built where the Klondike and Yukon rivers meet. Dawson reenacts its rowdy bawdy past every year with old-time saloons and turn-of-the-century tunes. And gaming tables where fortunes in gold dust were won and lost on a spin of the wheel. Eventually, Dawson's river ports were superseded by the Alaska Highway into Whitehorse, the new capital of the territory. Bulldozed through virtually virgin wilderness, the Alaska Highway was rammed into place to stave off a Japanese invasion of the West Coast after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The Japanese had landed military materiel on the Aleutian Islands off Alaska, and an invasion of the mainland was widely feared. 30,000 Canadian and American soldiers hacked out the 1,500-mile road in only 8 months. Called a prodigy of engineering, the highway connected the airfields between Dawson Creek, British Columbia, and Fairbanks, Alaska. When the Mammoth Project was finished, the Japanese ran a propaganda broadcast thanking the road builders for opening up the way for Japanese troops to march in. A slim ribbon across a lonely landscape. The Alaska Highway is the only land link between the far north communities of the Yukon and Alaska.
Okay, cut.
In the true spirit of the North, new paths are forged by adventurers like Martin Williams. Each journey is a test of Martin's skill, his dog's strength, and of the sled itself.
To go to the North Pole is many an adventurer's dream, and I'm on an expedition of 4 members who are going there in the near future. There's 2 members from Norway, myself from Whitehorse, Yukon in Canada, and an Australian. And the journey is about 500 miles, and it's over pretty rough terrain. The ocean is actually frozen, and so we'll be moving across this frozen ocean that creates huge pressure ridges that sometimes can reach 40 feet high. And we're going at a time of year when the temperatures can plummet to about -70, anywhere from -50 to -70 degrees. We're hoping that it's going to be obviously warmer than colder. And then as we get closer to the pole, so the sun will be getting slightly higher in the sky, and the temperatures will warm up to about -35.
In 1973, the Yukon natives began negotiating a comprehensive land claim settlement with the federal government. 15 years later, the tribes were awarded 16,000 square miles and $232 million for the lands they gave up. Native Yukon guide Joe Jack.
The Yukon land claims will give our people 16,000 square miles in which we will have total authority to tax, to manage our resources, to set quotas on game harvest, to be able to generate revenues, to develop our natural resources on those lands.
Under such settlements, The traditional culture, dance, and way of life of the native tribes can thrive once again. This agreement and others like it assure the First Peoples of Canada a strong voice in the uses of the land, a powerful hope for their own future. Canada may be the last industrialized nation on Earth whose heritage of vast tracts of untamed wilderness remains largely intact. Polar bears roam the Arctic, eagles claim the sky, and bears share the western highlands with mountain goats. A country of coasts, Canada's three seas are alive with fascinating creatures, some found nowhere else on Earth. Canada wears a dazzling necklace of cities strung along her southern border, pulsing with life. Engaged in the hustle and bustle of this century, at their backs is always the vastness beyond, untouched, untrammeled, untrod. That trackless frontier, that splendid expanse, challenges the hearts, the minds, and the souls of all Canadians as they wrestle with justice to determine the rights of the Indigenous peoples, the fate of their wildlife, and the destiny of the land itself. Around a blazing campfire, Girl Guides once sang a simple but eloquent song, a song that captures the essence of what Canada means to its people.
My country is my cathedral, the northern sky its dome. Others call it Canada, but I call